Mark my words, we are witnessing the downfall of capitalism as we speak. If you are paying attention to videos from Be Better or similar that are talking about the downfall of the Kardashians, I actually think that's a marker of the downfall of capitalism in general. And here's why I think that's happening. The very thing that enabled capitalists to become imperialists, which is people who spread their power and wealth around the world, is the thing that's taking away their power: globalization. Globalization and technology are two things that helped the ruling classes become the ruling classes. And that's actually the very thing that is uniting the people. With apps like TikTok and X, whether you like those apps or not, they are giving the commoner, the general populace, a voice. And not just a voice, but we're actually banding together to educate each other and to speak out on things that we've seen. The Kardashians are like the symbol of capitalism. And I feel like we're witnessing a people's rebellion on a global scale right now. Except it's not as obvious because back in the day, hundreds of years ago, a people's rebellion had to be in person, and we had to take like torches and pick pitchforks and like storm the castles. Nowadays, it looks more like telling them they can't do those things to us anymore and taking action against them by, of course, in capitalism, restricting our dollars and boycotting their products or stopping to buy their products quietly, which is, to me, that's what's happening to Kylie Jenner. To me, that is the most powerful form of protest. Just stopping to buy.
It's not just the downfall of the Kardashians that's a sign that capitalism is done. Celebrity culture is collapsing because Americans no longer buy into the illusion of fame and wealth. A 2023 YouGov survey found most Americans believe celebrities have little to no influence on their lives. That is a radical break from the 1990s and early 2000s when stars shaped fashion, music, and even politics. Social media stripped away the mystique and exposed celebrities as out-of-touch salespeople. Audiences see desperation in constant brand deals, stage drama, and declining viewership of award shows. The dream of being rich and famous no longer inspires. Instead, most Americans see wealth as inaccessible and fame as hollow. The capitalist promise of upward mobility through work and talent has been revealed as a myth, and people are walking away from it. The collapse shows in family life as well. U.S. fertility has dropped to 1.6 births per woman, one of the lowest levels ever recorded and far below replacement. The Department of Agriculture now estimates raising a single child costs in the hundreds of thousands. Wages have stagnated for decades, while housing, childcare, and healthcare costs have risen faster than inflation. Millennials and Gen Z openly say they are unwilling to bring children into a system stacked against them. Please make sure to watch till the end to see how close we actually are to the end of capitalism. If things don't change, capitalism will be forced out of existence.
The issue is that the birth rate decline has now been so long or so low for so long, we're now getting to the point where the cliff wall's right here. And in the next 10 years, Korea, Japan, China, Italy, and Germany, just to name 5 of the top 10, all age into obsolescence in this 10-year period where they simply don't have enough workers to maintain what we would consider to be a value-added, modern, industrialized economy. And their birth rates have now been so low for so long that even theoretical repopulation is well beyond them. And there's plenty of other countries that are just behind those 5. In terms of the geopolitical implications of this means a collapse of capitalism in its current form because there cannot be trade if there is not consumption. And there simply are not enough countries where the spending power is high enough and the population of workers is high enough to generate the consumption that is necessary to backstop trade. So we're going to have to develop something different.
Here is an upsetting update on capitalism I thought you might like to know. An ex-user that goes by the name Doc Kruger compared the cost of living in America today to that of 1971. And it's kind of disturbing. The median family income in the US has gone from 10K in 1971 to 55K today, a gain of 5.5 times. This is the unsettling part. However, the median cost of a car has gone from $4,000 to $48,000, an increase of 12 times. The median cost of a house has gone from 25,000 to 357,000, an increase of 14 times. The median cost of an Ivy League college education has gone from 3,000 a year to $87,000 per year, an increase of 29 times. The average cost of healthcare per person has gone from $400 to $15,000, an increase of 37 times. Basically, he says the average person in the US is worse off today than 1971. So much for progress. What I think is really important is that we don't write this off to just inflation. The blame for this huge jump in the cost of living goes to runaway capitalism. This is what it looks like when your government moves away from protecting workers for 30 years to protecting wealth.
Capitalism broke the moment wages were severed from the cost of living. For decades, paychecks stayed flat while the price of housing, food, healthcare, and education soared. In the 1970s, one full-time minimum wage job could cover rent, groceries, bills, and raise a family. Today, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, unchanged since 2009, while average rent in the U.S. has climbed past $2,000 a month. To live a basic life in most cities now requires at least 3 full-time minimum wage jobs, and in places like New York or Los Angeles, closer to 4. Even outside major metros, a single minimum wage earner falls thousands short of meeting the bare minimum costs of survival. This is not by accident, it is by design, because the system extracted value from labor without ever paying it back. The entire premise of capitalism, that hard work secures stability, collapsed the minute work no longer guaranteed survival. And what baffles me most is why people remain hell-bent on defending a system that openly refuses to defend them.
The reality is some people have to be left behind. Personally, I'm done explaining to people why capitalism does not benefit the common person. If people want to continue to worship celebrities and the 1%, there is nothing that we're going to do at this point to stop them. It is genuinely mind-boggling to me how many people are okay with the status quo when if we all work together, all of our lives could be so much better. I blame a lot of this on mass consumerism and hyper-individualism within American culture, but regardless, I just think some people are blinded by the reality that we live in. I also think that a lot of this obedience comes from the fact that people think that they'll be able to reach the 1% if they do what they're supposed to do. Also, some people are just genuinely unempathetic and couldn't care less whether or not life got better for the common person. But for those who genuinely do care and want to make the world a better place, we have to start putting our money where our mouth is. We can't continue to support corporations and individuals who genuinely go against our best interest.
If there's no need for human labor, capitalism is broken. And so if I'm the capitalist, right, if I'm the business owner, and I see that the system that I've built and that I'm benefiting from is in jeopardy because the thing that's needed, human labor, is no longer required, I can just use AI, that fundamentally jeopardizes the system of capitalism. But instead of saying, okay, we have to all as a society come together and reimagine a new way for us to structure our society, our social contract, our economy, the capitalist says, no, all of you laborers, you can be like me. That's the thing that they've been telling us in late capitalism. Online, you see it all the time. Start your own business, be your own boss, be a capitalist, you can win. The majority of us can't win. Individuals can win, but the majority of us will not win. But when AI comes and shifts everything, you don't have an option. The only option is to, if capitalism is still around, is to try to be a capitalist. But the system is broken. So those already at the top know that. And again, they want to keep their position. So instead of saying, oh, actually, let's come together and figure out a new way. Let's redistribute. Let's do UBI. Let's figure out a completely fundamentally new way of restructuring our society, our economy, in the social contract that we have. They say, no, I like my position up here. I'm a capitalist. You can still be a capitalist. And honestly, it's easier than ever. You don't even need humans. You just need to use AI and you can be like me. No, we're not buying the propaganda. We need a new system.
The end of capitalism terrifies the ultra-rich because it threatens the very illusion of control they have built. Artificial intelligence has the power to eliminate scarcity, automate labor, and make basic needs nearly free. Yet every step forward is monetized, gated, or rationed. Cloud servers, algorithms, even knowledge itself are sold back to the people, ensuring money must continue to flow upward. This is not about profit alone. It is about maintaining hierarchy, keeping the majority dependent, exhausted, and divided, while the top few preserve their sense of importance. AI could erase poverty, free people from endless work, and allow life itself to be lived instead of survived. Instead, it is weaponized to protect status, enforce scarcity, and remind the masses who rules. The moral bankruptcy is staggering. Technology that could liberate humanity is held hostage to preserve power and ego. The ultra-rich are playing a cruel, calculated game where innovation serves them, not society. And every breakthrough that could unchain ordinary people is measured against how much control it removes from their hands.
Capitalism isn't evolving with technology. It's trying to strangle it in its crib. Back in the 2010s, Jeremy Rifkin called it the zero marginal cost society, a world where the cost of creating, replicating, and sharing things drops so close to zero that profit itself starts to disintegrate. Think solar panels producing free energy after installation. Think open source software maintained by volunteers. Think 3D printed housing from local soil. These aren't distant hypotheticals. They're the early rumblings of a reality that breaks the price system itself. Rifkin saw it clearly. When the marginal cost of production approaches zero, the entire scaffolding of the profit model buckles. It's not just that selling becomes difficult. It's that the act of selling becomes unnecessary. If the sun powers your home, if your medicine is printed in your kitchen, if your knowledge is boundless and free, then what does the market have left to mediate? What value can it add except friction? And yet somehow, we're still stuck in a world where access is locked behind paywalls, where movies are deleted from platforms despite already being made, where software you bought yesterday stops working unless you keep feeding it your credit card. Why? Because capitalism requires scarcity. And when nature stops providing it, capitalism manufactures it. Welcome to the age of artificial scarcity, a world where abundance is real, but buried. Buried under licensing agreements, proprietary formats, rent-seeking patents, and subscription walls designed to simulate a constraint that no longer naturally exists. You don't buy the song. You lease the privilege of hearing it. You don't own the farm. You rent the fruit. Which brings us to Buckminster Fuller. Decades before Rifkin, before Silicon Valley, before open source anything, Bucky saw the contradiction. He knew the systems we'd built were no longer about utility. They were about justification, not making life better, but making life earnable. He called out the absurdity in plain language. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery. So we have inspectors of inspectors, and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. It wasn't cynicism. It was diagnosis, because Fuller also saw what could come next. He called it ephemeralization, the idea that human systems could do more and more with less and less, until eventually you can do everything with nothing. That's not sci-fi. That's what technology is for. That's what it wants to do. Lower input, higher output. Automation, miniaturization, decentralization, clean water from vapor, protein from precision fermentation, shelter printed from dirt and sunlight, knowledge coded into learning environments more adaptive than any classroom. But instead of letting technology liberate us, capitalism reroutes it to deepen dependence.
Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are: teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, Here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change, and the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976 they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money, but do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour.